Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of MECCA Moments. I'm Brandon Gillespie. It's Friday, June 19th, 2020. It's Juneteenth. Happy Freedom Day, everyone, and especially being from Texas. We've been celebrating this for many years, and so it's nice to see that everyone is finally getting around to celebrating something that is should be near and dear to every African American in this country. So happy Juneteenth. Today, we're talking about financial empowerment, which is very important, especially in times like these. I'm going to welcome our guest, Dr. Mercedes Ebanks from the MECCA Group, and also Vin Phillip from a law firm. I can't think right now because I was still stuck on celebration of Juneteenth. Dr. Ebanks, introduce our guest, please.
Oh, certainly. Today we have Mr. Ruthven Phillip. He's a unique and dual professional actively engaged in the practice of deciphering the gray area connecting law and accounting. He holds an undergraduate degree in accounting from the City University of New York. He is a graduate of the David A. Clark School of Law at UDC. His legal practice at the law offices of Ruthven R. Phillip is based in Washington, D.C. and focuses on representing and advising clients before the IRS concerning tax audits, appeals, tax crimes, and tax collection. He also has an extensive background in advising corporate and commercial and nonprofit entities on tax issues. Mr. Phillip also provides financial consulting and coaching to individuals and groups, coaching sessions focusing on financial fundamentals such as strategic financial planning, budgeting, business organizations, and all areas of financial leadership. Thank you, Attorney Phillip, for being with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Ebanks. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful. Brandon, you gave a great introduction, just letting us know, reminding us of what today is. And I just have a few comments about today. You know, the most important thing I think I take away from Juneteenth actually is the fact that it was Black businesses being supported by Blacks and African Americans. So that's the thing I take away from this Emancipation Celebration Day. You know, and that's a lesson we still need to learn today. In fact, we don't have enough of us supporting our own businesses. So that's what made the Black Wall Street real successful, was because we were supporting our own, despite the Jim Crow laws that were in place. In fact, they might have helped. Some may argue that they might have helped us because we were able to support our own and be very, very successful. If we could today implement behaviors like that, I think we'll be much more successful as a community and be really, really empowered. So that's some of my opening comments to celebrate the day. I think the way to celebrate the day actually is to support Black businesses. You know, we should actually make that part of our celebration period, because that's how they were so successful. I mean, Black America economy is about $1.3 trillion that we spend a year on all kinds of stuff except for Black businesses. So, you know, we'll be talking more about that. I'll slip in a couple of comments about how we can really empower our own, and look forward to the conversation.
Well, I think definitely when you talk about freedom, empowerment really exactly comes from having that ability to have finances in control. And so we're going to be talking about that today. So financial freedom, let's start at the very baseline. Putting a budget together. How do you put a budget together, especially in times like these where you may not be working, you may be living off of your savings or other accounts right now? How do you put together a budget?
Yeah, so, you know, that's kind of fundamental. Like I said, Black wealth at this point total somewhere between 1.3 and 1.5 million. We spend a lot of our resources on lots of things except the things that, like, if you look around your home and look around what your friends have, most of our spending is not on any assets, right? Most of the things we spend money on are things that really depreciate in value, don't appreciate in value because we don't have enough real estate or enough homes and different things like that. What we spend our money on is a lot of clothes, things that really don't hold value. So we've got to refocus and in our budgeting. So budgeting is critical sort of before COVID-19, but here we are. So you have to make some changes or make some decisions actually in budgeting now at this point. What will I spend money on? What's critical? What's essential? So the truth of the matter is that during this pandemic, if your credit card company is saying, well, we'll give you a break and for 3 months, and then after that, you have to pay what the minimum balance is, then you might want to take advantage of that opportunity now, right? I mean, if you can afford to pay, but certainly if you can't, because cash is king at the moment, right? Because
Right.
people aren't working and there's just
Right.
a whole lot of resources. So you have to make, I like to say it this way. You have to make the distinction between what's important and what's necessary.
I feel
Right.
like that's been kind of the whole thing during this pandemic, not just financially, financial priorities, but just priorities, period, in your life. And so when we talk about priorities, what is important in this time right now? I heard cash.
Right. So so what's important are your basics. You
Mhm.
need food, you need shelter. You may or may not have to pay your car note, feeding your family, keeping a roof over your head. That's what I call necessary. It's important to pay the credit card bill, but they can wait. If cash is king and funds are tight at the moment, then you need to focus on those things just to keep a roof over your head, be able to go to work and come back home, right? You're going to have to
Mhm.
make some choices regards to maybe you have to find some more coupons, right? Maybe you're going to have to team up with your neighbor and decide you're not going out every day. So a lot of times we find that every time you want something, you go to the grocery, but you don't really plan your schedule for the day, or you need to decide because you're wasting gas. You're wasting time and you're wasting money. If every day you go to the grocery, maybe you team up, you partner up with one of your neighbors and say, look, this week I'm going to go to the grocery. We can partner up and do the shopping, and I come home and save some gas money. So you've got to begin to economize, especially in an environment like this. Now, in terms of creating your own budget, a lot of people don't know how to make a budget or where to get started. But even before that, I like to think of a budget as something as more as a journey and not a one and done. So people get frustrated, people give up, but more importantly, your mindset needs to be accurate before you actually engage in making a budget. Folks say to me all the time, listen, I don't have any money, so, I don't need a budget. Well, that's actually not true. If tomorrow you went out and won the lottery, what would you do with the money that you won? You wouldn't know
Right.
how to manage it. So
Right.
the fact that, so budgeting to me is more a situation of your attitude, your disposition, your personality, than it has actually to do with the money itself. If you adopt a more, you know, a more economic sort of balance in your life, then that's better. So what are the things you need to do to begin the budget? First, just figure out where you spend your money. Like where does your money go if you don't have any money? You always find yourself at the end of the month. I don't know, I got paid this week and before the week is out, I'm broke. Like, what are you doing with your money? So begin to track your money. Now, a lot of banks and some other financial institutions have apps and other tools to help you begin to track your money. So if you know where your money is going, then that helps you to begin to develop a realistic budget, not some pie in the sky thing that you can never live up to. You actually need a budget that kind of works for you. So you begin the process, you just need to sort of track your money. People think of budgets as something that's restrictive and it's not fun, but that's really not true. A budget is just essentially you finding out where your money goes or you directing where you want your money to go. And having a budget can be fun. I know that sounds almost like an oxymoron, right? Having a budget seems something that can be fun, but the thing is, if your budget is tied to certain goals, you get freedom. So if your budget is tied to, let's say, I want a vacation, then then that's a goal you want to achieve. My budget is tied to something. I want to pay off some debt because I want to be free. Now, I can't tell you how freeing it is not to have credit card debt. You're looking at somebody who had credit card debt, and paid it off. And now I'm free every month. I don't have to pay this bill all the time. And one of the things about credit cards, while I'm on that, I want you to know that a lot of people have a false, sort of make a false choice. They think that their credit card is their emergency fund. So what in their thinking, they're like, well, if I really need money and I'm strapped for cash, I use my credit card. Now think about that. You're borrowing money to pay back as part of your emergency fund plan. Does that make any sense? And you're paying a higher interest. No, you don't want to rely on your credit card as your emergency fund. You actually want to start putting away some money to save for an emergency fund. Now, I will say this, that it's more difficult during times like these to kind of put some money away. But question I would ask you, what did you do with your stimulus check you received, the $1,200? How did you really spend that? What did you really do with it? You should be saving from your salary at least 10 to 20% of your income. I'm going to stop here, Brandon, and let you jump in.
So what I hear is really before you start setting a budget, you should really start setting your mind to get into the space of setting a budget. So
Absolutely.
being honest with your situation
Mhm.
and being honest with where you want to go and really creating an attitude that facilitates saving and creating the life really essentially what you want to live.
Yeah, that mindset is really important because budgeting is I would say, is a journey. This is something you're going to do for the rest of your life, right?
Right.
So people get frustrated. They have a budget, and this month they went over. They're like, well, I failed. And next month they were successful. And the following month, back and forth like a yo-yo. Well, the first time you make a budget, you're going to fail. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So because it's not going to work out right, you're always going to going back and tweaking it and shaping it because something came up you didn't plan on, something you didn't think about in the original draft didn't look right. That's just a work in progress, a work in process, and until you quote unquote get it right, you may never
Right.
get it right. But just think of federal government or think of a major corporation. They try to come in under their budget, but they don't always do that. They fail at times. Well, forget the federal government. They just print more money when they want to. So you can't use an example.
We can't print our own money. If we could print our own money, that's actually illegal. So
right. So we can't use them as an example, but I'm saying they blow the budget all the time. But I think the principle here is that you have a budget, you have some guiding principles, you have some financial management. So when we talk about Juneteenth and the wealth gap disparity, for instance.
Yes.
Folks have budgets who actually, if you have a budget, it helps narrows the wealth gap because you have some savings, you have something that you can pass on as a legacy to your kids. But when that's not in place, this is such a core fundamental financial principle for differences between our community and other communities, right? So we are more a consumer-driven community.
Mm-hmm.
African Americans, Blacks, are more consumer-driven, right? I read a statistic that said Asians, a dollar circulates in the Asian community 28 times. The same stat said that same dollar will circulate in the Jewish community 19 times. However, when it comes to our community, it might circulate 6 hours.
Wow.
Think about that.
Wow.
Right. 6 hours, and then our money goes to Fendi. 6 hours, and our money goes to Audi. 6 hours, and our money goes to, you can fill in the blank, Louis. Right?
Right.
I'm not saying they're bad, but I'm just saying we need to do a better job. And what made the Black Wall Street so successful was because we had African Americans supporting African Americans. Now, it's funny, it's called Black Wall Street, but there were no brokerage houses then.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Right. So I mean, there wasn't even a bank, actually, as I understand it then, which turned out to be somewhat of a good thing because when they burned the place down, if you had money, it would be insured by a white bank. So, you could get something back insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's a good thing they didn't have any banks then. But I'm saying what made that thing so successful, and a major part of it was people of color supporting people of color, people investing in people of color owning assets. That was the other thing, right? People then own property, which, that society was different, agrarian, but I get that. But people own assets. People actually own transportation companies.
Right.
People own buildings. People own hotels. So that's the rub for us. We have to start spending our money on things that appreciate and not things that depreciate. As soon as you drive that Mercedes Benz off the parking lot, it's over.
It's going down.
It's going downhill. So we've got to shift our priorities as to spending if we're ever going to close the wealth gap. Now, I live in Washington, D.C., and I can tell you in Maryland, which is next door, there are two counties I'll use as an example. PG County, which is probably the richest Black county in all of America, the very said 3-bedroom house that you have in PG County, if you were just to relocate that house to Montgomery County, the value would appreciate by 10 to 20%. So you talk about redlining, that still exists out there in the financial place. Now, my own personal view is that we can protest and we can do a lot of things in the street, but if you want transformation and generational transformation, then you have to start with the economy and economics. If we don't have economics in the program as the major thing to change, and I'm not saying police brutality and protesting isn't important, but you got to have some piece of economics tied to some of this stuff, or else that's not the change that you're looking for is not going to happen. A classic example is Baltimore. In Baltimore, I like to use maybe the Freddie Gray case as an example. I think the Baltimore legislation, city council, whoever it was, did pass a law that police should have body cams, but it didn't really go into operation for a long time because it wasn't funded. See, so you can pass a law, but if something is not funded, if the economics isn't there, then it doesn't move the needle. So if you want to get folks to change, start attacking their pocketbooks. You'll get all the change you need.
And I guess similarly, if you want a different life, you have to impact that change with financial assets and really a plan. So how often should you change your budget? Is it like the Constitution, where it's a living, breathing document, or is it just,
Yeah, I think a budget is a living, breathing document that you have to change from time to time because your goals change, your needs change, your wants change. I used to tell some of my friends, look, I don't like being a landlord, but you know what? Tenants pay for my habits. And probably I don't want to change my habits. I want to continue to go on vacation somewhere. I want to be able to drive a nice car. I want to be able to live in a nice neighborhood. So you've got to decide. So that's part of your budgeting. Your budget will never remain the same. The same amount you pay in mortgage this year, the mortgage company, Wells Fargo or Bank of America, whoever, your payment changes every year or every couple of years. So that's not going to be the case. Your car note is going to go up. So your budget, there must be some elasticity to it because there's always this thing called emergencies. So that's why it's moving.
Right. Emergencies will come with or without our permission, right?
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can try to plan for it, but you know what? It's going to go down the way it's going to go down. Emergencies are just part of life, and they're going to happen. The thing is, what we find in Black America is that we don't have enough even saved for 3 months in this pandemic. You know what I mean? So that's a real problem when we don't have enough money saved. We can't rely on, and the fact that I just used this example of a property live in Montgomery County versus PG County, the fact then means we don't have some equity to draw on.
Right.
So
Right.
they're all connected.
Well, a recent survey from Career Builder said that 79%, over 79% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So we know that is a real problem, not having emergency savings. Let's talk about building wealth. This is the time people are saying, okay, you're at home, you're working from home, you have a little bit more time to do stuff, and you want to start a business. How do you go about starting a business? What should you do?
So that is one of the major ways I think for us as a community to begin to change the conversation and begin to build wealth and generationally so we can transform, lives of our kids and grandkids and whoever is coming behind. We actually need to start owning some businesses. We need to start owning some franchises or starting your own business. So a lot of times, someone will come into my office and say, I want you to help me set up a LLC or a corporation, or I want to start my own business. And to me, that's a simple thing to do. But what I'm really concerned with, a client of mine who comes in and says, well, I want to start a business, I want to understand that person's mindset, right? So forgive me for a minute. I'm going to get a little bit spiritual now and say this. Now, I need to know what you're called to do. What is your purpose? What is your mission? This thing that you call a business, are you passionate about it? Is it something you're willing to die for? So I need to know your mindset. Have you actually tried out this idea with a few friends and say, hey, listen, I'm selling widgets. Is this something you might be interested in buying? They will give you some comments. They'll give you some feedback. You need to try it out. I mean, what is your personality and how do you respond to failures, for instance, right? So a lot of people say they want to be an entrepreneur. So I said, okay, you want to be an entrepreneur. What does that look like? Because someone will say to me, well, I'm a mechanic and I want to leave where I'm working and start my own business, start my own shop, right? So I'll say, fine. And then they open up a business in their house, in their yard. But all they want to do is fix cars, for instance. And I said, you're not an entrepreneur if all you want to do is that thing you want to do. Because an entrepreneur is someone who casts vision. An entrepreneur is someone, I'll ask the question, do you know anything about accounting? Do you know anything about a balance sheet? Do you know anything about a profit and loss? Do you like payroll? Do you know anything about marketing? Because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to have to know a little bit about some of these things to be a real entrepreneur. True entrepreneurs know a little bit about or know enough, to be dangerous, so to speak, right? To talk to people who can help them. But if all you want to do is just fix cars, all you've done is change jobs, right? You left working for Advanced Auto and now you're working for you, but you're not an entrepreneur because you haven't dealt with all the other issues that you're going to have to deal with if you run a business, if you own a business. So the first thing is, what is your mindset? What is your purpose? What is your calling? Things like that. I want to know about the person. Are they passionate about it? Because, if you're not passionate about your business, I mean, it's just as Abraham Lincoln says, if you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life.
And that's something that we all, well, I hope that we're all looking towards. Dr. Ebanks, do you have something to add?
Yes, I thank you for all this information, and my mind is just spinning. Being an entrepreneur myself, but also admitting that when my business partner and I started the MECCA Group, we knew how to do testing. We knew how to provide therapy. There were so many other elements to having a business within the field that we did not know about, and that we had to rely on getting trained and being educated in those areas because we were trained as psychologists. So I think that point that you're saying is that, what is your purpose? We knew we had a greater purpose within the field of psychology. However, we also knew that in order to do that, we had to work with attorneys that knew about business development. We knew we needed accountants that really knew about where our money was going and how to not get in trouble with the IRS. So it also is, okay, you know what you do, but have a strong team. And that kind of goes back to being part of the Black community and Black businesses is that you want to support each other. You don't have to do it alone. You know, there are Black attorneys, there are, you know, African American, you know, accountants. There are other people that need to be part of and that you support one another. So as you were talking about the money circulating, that is how the money is circulating in those dark
Exactly.
communities. You know,
Exactly. Let me just add a couple more points as to things you should marinate on, if you will, if you're contemplating starting your own business. The other thing you need to think about is a corporate structure. Do I want an LLC? Do I want to be a sole proprietor? And there are benefits or there's advantages and disadvantages of each. So you need to give consideration to, and I'll just use the lowest hanging fruit just as an example. As an example, you want to not be a sole proprietor. Now, I know it's easy to do, and you just roll out of bed one day and say, you know what, I'm in business. But think about some of the consequences of that. Some of the consequences of doing that would mean that you're using your social security number all over the place, and people have access to your social security number. That's a problem. It's so easy to do, but then think further down the line, the kind of problems you can have with that kind of exposure. The second thing I would say, if you just want to roll out of bed and be a sole proprietor and be your own boss, okay, I'm driving Uber and I just want to do what I want to do. Well, just think about the fact that a lot of sole proprietors don't keep track of their expenses and all that goes with that and paying estimated taxes. That's a problem with sole proprietor land, right? The other big problem is the legal liability. Why would you want to start a business and be a sole proprietor and expose your house, your dog, your cat, and everyone that lives in your house to legal liability just because it's easy? It's an easy formation to do. No, you don't really want to go down that road. So you need to get registered / incorporated somewhere, and don't be a sole proprietor. Choose another form of operation, either a corporation, a partnership, a LLC, something. But just don't be out there naked as a sole proprietor.
With that, Brandon touched on how, the percentage of people that are living paycheck to paycheck. Can you address the emotional stress and the emotional impact that this has on individuals, on business owners, as well as families that you have seen in your work?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've seen is that, and it starts from inception. When you start running a business, especially a sole proprietor or a partnership, some people do it alone. So they don't bring in their partner, they don't bring in their husband, they don't bring in their wife in that decision-making process. So, one of the key questions is, how are you going to fund this business when you get started? Or how are you going to fund it as it goes along if you can't make payroll? I mean, where are resources going to come from? Because if it's not happening in your business, believe me, it's not happening in your house. And then that's going to be a bigger problem than what's happening with your business, depending on your home situation. Because if you can't provide to feed your home, then, as a lawyer, I just say the biggest reason, if you will, cause for divorce is finance. So if your business is not running smoothly, and this COVID situation has a great impact on our community, because a lot of the times we find ourselves doing these, or what they call now, essential services. And lots of our folks cannot work from home. And that's a real problem. I mean, I can work from home. Lots of other people can work from home. But if you are a cashier at Whole Foods, you just got to go to work. So I think one of the lessons from this experience is that we need to empower people financially to one, get better education, better training, and place themselves in a situation when they could provide digital services. And I think a lot of folks are moving away and getting to realize that now in this crucial moment. And hey, listen, if I'm a cashier somewhere, and I have to go to work, then I'm exposed to the virus. But, we never made a plan to really, how do I deal with that? And so it's causing a lot of stress, and finance is the biggest headache. So if your finances are out of whack, especially during this time, it's causing a lot of tension at home, a lot of stress. Families are, separating, dissolving. it's just not a good situation at home when the finances are not together, and especially in this COVID moment where there was no plan. See, the thing is, there was no plan in place as to how to deal with emergencies, and then folks never really sat down and took the time to say, okay, because you have homes where I've some of my clients, they you'll have a husband and a wife, and I'll talk more about this maybe later on, where they're filing their taxes jointly. So this is a classic example. I'll give it to you. I'll have a client who had filed taxes jointly. Now, let's say the husband was an entrepreneur, had his own business, but he never paid estimated. They filed jointly, and now they owe the IRS. Well, the IRS is going to levy both bank accounts, husband and wife, even though she didn't have anything to do with it. The simple fact is they file as joint return. And so now everyone's assets is at risk. If you file it separately, then that'd be a different story. At least one person is exposed and one person is protected. So, this whole finance piece is impacting homes greatly, and it's causing a lot of turmoil, especially in our community.
I mean, I think that's something to be aware of. You could think you're doing the best, you're starting your own business, you're doing your own thing, but if you don't have protection, if you don't have a vision, if you don't have a legal strategy, you could be in jeopardy in a lot of ways, even in your relationship.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I'll see, I'll ask someone who comes in and say, "So, did you talk this over with your wife or with your husband?" Because how you plan to fund this? Because if you rely on the family 401k, that could be problematic if things don't go right in your business as you start up. So, is your partner on board initially, and are they all the way in? You know what I'm saying? If they're not all the way in, then you're going to have to figure out how am I going to separate my house life, my home life from my business life, and how I'm going to make both of them work. Because if your partner, your husband, your wife, not involved in it, then that's a huge problem. You shouldn't get started.
Well, since we're talking about headaches, let's move into the IRS. There has been an extension for July, and it's less than 30 days away. So what do you do and you know that you owe right now on your taxes? What do you do right now to prepare for that?
So I'm going to say this 3 times. File, file, file. The deadline, so April 15 has now turned into July 15. So that's the first thing I want to leave with you. I want you to understand. First thing is that, file your taxes if you can on July 15, right? File, file, file. There are a couple of reasons why I think you need to file on time as best you can. One, there's something called the statute of limitations. So I'm going to talk a little legalese here for a minute to try to help you work through this. So the statute of limitations, in terms of, let's talk refunds. If you are entitled to a refund and don't file your tax return within 3 years from when your tax return is due to be filed, then you lose the refund. Now, I don't know how many of you can afford to do that, but I'm saying I have clients who come all the time, haven't filed in years. And once the returns are prepared, you realize that some back years, they were getting refunds and refunds and refunds. They're not going to get it because the statute of limitations, which is 3 years from when you're supposed to file it, has expired. So the first rule here is file, file, file. You got any questions on that, Brandon? The 3-year rule?
I think I'm clear. File, 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 because there could be some money out there, right?
There could be some money out there. So that's the good news. The bad news about filing is that there's another statute of limitations. That's 10 years. And that statute says that if you owe, the IRS has 10 years to collect. So that's A.
It's always the government. They give you less time to get your money, but more time to prosecute, right?
So the B part of that analysis is, so they have 10 years to collect. That's the first rule I want to let you know. But the 10-year period starts the later of when the return was due or whenever you file it. So classic example, let's say it's 2001. Your 2000 return is due in 2001. If you file it on time in 2001, they have 10 years from that period, statutorily, all goes well, to collect. If you're now going to file your 2000 tax return, they have 10 years from now to collect.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. So you really want to file like
Yes.
when you're supposed to or close to it,
Yes.
right? So that rule is real special. It's the later of when the tax return is due, and you know when it's due, or when you file.
The point is they're going to get their money, but they're not going to give you all your money if you wait. But
You
they're
The
going
wait,
to
government
get
has
their
the
money.
upper hand. The government
right?
has the upper hand.
Government has the upper hand. And as far as that is concerned, the other thing is if you can't file, for God's sake, file an extension.
Mhm.
Okay, so I need to explain why filing an extension, especially people in our community, they would decide to, oh man, I realize that I'm just not going to file, put my head in the sand and just take an ostrich approach and just run away from it. Well, that's not really going to get you anywhere. So the reason I need you to file an extension at the deadline date is because there's something called interest and penalties. I know you've heard them before. They're cousins. Interest and penalties. So here are two rules. First rule, it is the same rule actually for both interest and penalties. Generally, if you don't file the return when it is due, in this case, July 15th. So today is what, the 19th? You got a little more than what, 3 weeks, a little bit, 3.5 to file your 2019 return. If you don't file it when it's due, in addition to which you don't file an extension, the penalty, if you owe, the penalty is 5% of what you owe, compounded up to 25%. Now, I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer. Spend 55 cents, file, put it in the mail if you have to, or file it electronically. But why would you pay 5% up to 25% of the liability you owe just because you failed to file an extension? It couldn't get any simpler than that. So think about it. That's 25% of what you owe in interest. Behind that comes the penalty. So that because there are two issues, failure to file and failure to pay. So in addition to you failing to file on time or file an extension, there's the failure to pay penalty. And that's another 5%. So between the failure to file and the failure to pay, you're looking at between 45 and 50% of what you owe. Why do it?
So my question is, what do you do with the refund? What do you advise people to do with their refunds?
Okay, so depending on your financial situation, you could either take the refund and save it, or you could take it and pay off some debt. Excuse me. Now, I do believe that if you're saving and you have a good enough emergency fund, you might want to try. I mean, that's the first thing you kind of want to try to build an emergency fund with your refund. The other thing is you might try to pay off some of your debt. Excuse me. Because what's going to happen is, imagine you have this savings and you're getting, I don't know, 3%. But the credit card you have, you're paying 21%. Now, does that make any sense? No. You need to try to get rid of this debt as soon as you can.
And unfortunately, that goes back to some people's mentality that they use the refund for that vacation, or they'll use the refund to purchase things, which is good, because I certainly believe that people work hard and they should treat themselves and they should be able to take vacations. But it goes back to, I think, how we started the conversation about budgeting and planning and putting money aside for those particular things ahead of time, instead of just relying on this pot of gold that might come to you.
Most people haven't paid off their credit card bills from shopping last Christmas. I can put a bet on that. Right? They're still paying off last year's Christmas shopping bill. And now with COVID, I don't know when they're going to pay and they're paying the minimum balance. Excuse me. So I believe that if I would cancel Christmas if it were up to me. Folks just can't shop and get into Thanksgiving and all that unless, I'd be the Grinch that stole Christmas, because you just can't afford to be buying gifts and doing all this vacation and all that until you get your house in order.
You're stepping on people's toes.
Yeah, right. I know. I understand that. Look, it's getting personal now, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I'm okay with it. But if you really want to change your life and, honestly, with all kidding aside, leave a legacy, because there's some other things we didn't touch on. But once you're free financially, you could really begin to invest in community. You could really begin to give to other causes. You could really begin to make an impact and a difference. I mean, I'm sure, everyone listening wants to leave some kind of legacy and some kind of impact in life. They don't want to leave the world the same way they met it. They want to leave it a better place. But you can't do that unless you're financially free. You can't do that with a 9-to-5. That's not going to happen.
So I have a question that one of the viewers asked. It said, I filed an IO. Should I pay by the 15th or just get it in, just to get it out the way?
Right. If you can't afford to pay by the 15th, you should pay by the 15th. Like I said, it's 5% on what you owe if you don't file on time. It sounds like you would want to file on time. So the difference between, here's a magic number. The difference between filing on time and owing and not filing on time and owing is 4.5%. So instead of charging you 5% of interest for failing to file on time, they would charge you 0.05%. You would save 4.5% just because you filed on time or you file an extension and then filed on time. But if you don't do any of that, it's 5% up to 25%. So if you have the resources to pay, you can't pay all, pay some, and reduce that even 0.05% that you owe on them. And then you need to figure out, why are you owing? Is this a every year thing? Is it, a long-term thing? Or what's your strategy to get out of owing? And what do you want to do with your money? But that could be another talk show. We could get into that another time. It looks like our time is gone. What's happening here?
We let it go on. This is a very interesting and a much needed conversation.
We just getting warmed up. I mean, Brandon, you got to turn the clock back now.
Well, we all use money. Not all of us use it correctly, and so this is an important conversation that must be had when we're talking about financial empowerment. And it sounds from this, listening to you, it really is about setting priorities and setting a vision for yourself. And where do you see yourself in the future? Do you see yourself as an entrepreneur? Do you see yourself just not making it, paycheck to paycheck? What is your priority in your life? And that's the first step in finding financial freedom.
Yeah, I think for me, and I'll share this with you all. I mean, as I think about life, I think about my own life, I think of how I want to be remembered. Like, what will they say about me, perhaps, in my, maybe at my funeral or something? How do I want to be remembered? What kind of impact do I want to leave behind? Sorry, what kind of impact I want to leave behind? And so I think that shapes how I live my life and how I manage my finance. So the question I would leave with the both of you, in terms of how you see your life going and the kind of impact you want to have. I I mean, when I die, I mean, the question for me is right now is, am I living my resume or am I living my eulogy? Like, what will they say about me when I die, right? What am I doing right now? Am I living my eulogy, making change in community, changing people's life, empowering them, or am I living my resume, all the degrees I have, all the toys I have, and all that other stuff? I want to live my eulogy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy you say that because, again, talking about, today, the significance of Juneteenth
Yeah.
and with what is going on, the awareness in this country now regarding what has happened to Black and Brown people is also to support Black businesses, is not to forget those Black causes as well, and those that support, Black and Brown causes. We have so many nonprofit organizations that need donations, that need, financial support. Can you speak to that and how, as you said, like, how do people want to be remembered and regarding their eulogy, like, how should we also support these organizations?
Yeah, I want to come back and talk a little bit about something that I sort of promote in terms of people setting up small nonprofits. So the IRS some years ago made this rule that you could set up a small nonprofit, small being if your revenue is less than $50,000, and it's a real easy process to get started to set up your own 501c3 and really do empowering work in the community to make change. People are doing this all the time. They're just not running it through an organization. People are, connected with their neighbors and they're helping others. And they do this over a course of time. But, well, I'm suggesting that what you need to do is just set up a small organization, 501c3. It's not really complicated except for the bigger ones. And you can do that and really begin to make impact. If it grows, then, you take it to where it needs to be. Now, with regards to your question, I think you have to decide on what organizations are really making impact. There are a lot of nonprofits out there, but they all aren't doing, really great work. I mean, sometimes you find three nonprofits in the same neighborhood, same community, all doing the same thing. Well, maybe they need to consolidate. So you need to see, and you need to look. I would say you need to look at their financial statement information before you just start giving. I know giving is an emotional thing, and I get that. But you need to really step back and look at their finances. Like, how much of what you give go towards salaries versus the purpose for which you're giving your funds to? How much of this money you're giving to the food bank actually goes to buy food versus pay salaries? You know what I mean? So those are the kinds of evaluation we need to step back and look at before we even start giving. And so a little more critical thinking, if you will.
I like that point because a lot of times that even at the grocery store or you go to certain stores and they'll say, "Oh, do you want to give $5 to this organization?" I always ask them, "Are they getting 100%?"
Right.
And if they tell me, "Oh, I don't know," well, no, I'd rather,
Yeah.
because unfortunately, sometimes the businesses will take a portion of that contribution that you're supposedly giving to the organization. So for me, I'd rather just, hand over the money directly to the organization rather than a third party.
Absolutely, because some third parties might even take a percentage of what you give as a fee for the nonprofit. So they're sort of a third party who just collecting resources, but actually they're taking a cut. You don't really want that.
Right. I just love how you said the eulogy, or are you living a life for the eulogy? I think, Dr. Ebanks, we talked a few weeks ago about relationships and what legacy are you going to have in your relationships. So I think there's a theme in all of this. What life are you living, and what legacy will you leave in terms of your relationships, your finances, your spirit? So I like that you connect. This is not just about your money in your pocket. This is about what people will remember. This is about how you give back to others, and it's also a spiritual thing. I know you touched a little bit about it, but it really is a spiritual, a psychological shift in creating this budget, in creating the life you want to live in regards to finances?
It's actually, a lot of people from a spiritual perspective. So there are lots. There's this big story in the Bible that talks about people with different talents and stuff like that, and it goes to talk about somebody had 5 talents and 2 talents and 1 talent. I don't know if you're familiar with that story at all, but there's so many lessons you can learn from that story. And it said that the guy with 2 talents. I mean, I wonder what his response would be when accountability was asked of him, like, what did you do with the 2 talents I gave you, right? I wonder if his response would be, well, I was busy helping the person with the 5 talents, so I didn't get time to really work on my 2. Well, no, you given a special talent, a special call to do the 2 talents that you've been given. You need to take care of that first before you help the person with the 5 talents. That's all I'm saying. You know what I mean? Because if you spend, so a lot of people in life spend time, helping people who actually know what they're called to do and are doing that. But you never get to yours because you're busy helping somebody else with their 5 talents. A lot of people in that story talk about the guy who had 1 talent and buried it, right? So they hop on that and they talk a lot about that. The guy who had the 1 talent and buried it. So my question to you is really this. If you were given 2 talents, but you never used any of them, how different are you from the guy who buried his 1? Aren't you burying yours also? I mean, it's just a burial, a different kind of burial, but it's a burial.
Right. Wow. Anyone out there listening, use what you got.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, really, you break down the story. I'm just saying, if you got somebody with 5 talents and you just busy helping them because you got 2, and you saying, well, I'll get to mine, but you never get to it, and you stand to criticize the person with the 1, you burying your 2. I don't know what you're talking.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's really about putting your mask on first and using your talents and gifts and money appropriately.
Yeah.
I love that. It's biblical too. So if you're a believer, then it's there.
I'm just calling it.
And it ties in with all of our other MECCA moments.
Yes,
all conversations are about really looking at yourself, seeing where you are, where you want to be, what's your purpose, and how are you going to move forward so that you could be a better you to be able to provide for others. Because if you're constantly just helping others, but you're stuck, then you're not helping yourself out. And being in touch with where you are is first and foremost.
Let me since I'm preach for a minute on something else, but this talent and this gift thing. I'm saying sometimes you don't recognize what you're called to do, and I get that it's not always clear. But then there's some people who hold talent hostage, right? So some people never give to do what they're called to do because they're not praised, they're not worshiped, they're not adored, they're not elevated. Right. So they never do because nobody's worshiping them. But the thing about holding talent hostage is simply this, being gifted doesn't mean that you've been given something. It means you have something to give.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So a lot of people who
absolutely
are talented feel like they've been given something and they hold talent hostage instead of sharing. It's not always clear. And that's okay. I mean, being gifted, or if you have a talent or something to, you measure that by, I measure it by, and you know what I'm going to do? I wrote an article on what are you called to do. I'm gonna, if it's okay with you, I'll send you an email of the article, and your followers and everybody else can take a look at it and give me some feedback on it.
Certainly. Then, again, part of our purpose is to provide resources and information. So please
I'll send it. I'll email it out to you guys and just give me some feedback on it.
Absolutely, Ben. My piano is right here, and I'm trying not to play music under the sermon.
It ain't the weekend now. It ain't the weekend. Just hold up. I'm gonna come back and we're gonna do it right.
Okay, Ben. Yes, Ben, we're running out of time. So do you have any final thoughts when it comes to setting yourself free financially and getting on the pathway to holistic well-being?
Yeah, I would say this. Don't get discouraged when you look at the mounting of your debt and where you have to climb out from under it. You know, lots of us have educational debt. Lots of us have, mortgage debt, credit card, and, the usual suspects. I would say, step back from it and devise a plan. If you're a person of faith, pray about it, work on a plan, get with somebody who can help you. Don't get discouraged. You too can get through this. It might mean you need to get another job. You might have to go back and get some better education. You might have to have a side hustle. I don't really care how you get there. The important thing is to come up with a plan. You want to leave your kids, your family with a legacy. You don't want to pass on this debt and all that to them. You want them to be free, and that you want to reclaim some of the time that has been stolen from you, really, in a 9 to 5. So what you want to do is begin to think seriously about putting a financial plan together, and start with your budget. Start working on a budget. And next time I come back, I want to hear some budget stories.
Want to see our budget?
Yeah, yeah. This is great. This is perfect for Juneteenth. This is perfect for a really beginning a celebration of true freedom in your own personal lives, in your financial lives, in your relationships. Because the truth be told, money impacts every aspect of our lives. And if it's funny,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
Well, amen. Let the church say amen.
Yes. Dr. Ebanks, do you have anything else to add before we go?
Attorney Phillip, I want to thank you so much for having this conversation, for just providing all the wealth of information that you have shared with us, and really get us to thinking about, our money, how we're earning it and how we're spending it, really, to be legends within, our community, within our family. Do we want to provide generational wealth to our children, and to our family members? How do we want to be remembered within our community, globally, locally? So thank you for all of that. And again, this has just added to the MECCA moments. My business partner and I, Dr. Keisha Mack, and I, we started the MECCA Group 14 years ago, not knowing what we were doing. We have been blessed to have an excellent team behind us. Brandon has been a part of our team. We have those who, work within our business and help us work on our business. So we, appreciate everyone. With today being Juneteenth, we certainly want to acknowledge our ancestors for all the hard work that they did, that they did not get, any credit for, any acknowledgement, and certainly did not receive payments for all of the work that they have done. So as I wear this t-shirt to honor some of our legends, I want to encourage our viewers to support, Black and brown businesses, and not to forget about the nonprofit organizations that are there, and to do your part to do things to move forward. And also with Father's Day on Sunday, I certainly want to recognize all the fathers who are actively involved in their children's lives, who are just, coaches and cooks and, all caretakers, and just continue, my brothers, my friends, my father, a father of my children. So I just want to say happy Father's Day to everyone. Thank you.
Absolutely. Happy Father's Day to everyone, and happy Juneteenth. And I love the theme. A lot of times we are afraid to ask for help. There are people out there who can help you. There are trained professionals who can help you move towards freedom.
Yes, sir.
And so if you want freedom, don't be afraid to ask for it. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for this wonderful MECCA Moments. We'll see you back here next week. Like, share, subscribe, comment, do all those things. And we'll be back here next week. Hope you have a great weekend. Bye-bye.